In a dusty, forgotten attic, in a small, quiet town, a discovery was made that would send shockwaves through the world of boxing. The kind of find that only happens once in a lifetime, the kind that could rewrite the history of the sport forever. What seemed like an ordinary cardboard box, tucked away under old family heirlooms, contained something far more valuable than anyone could have imagined: the lost journal of Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest and most iconic figures the world has ever known. But this wasn't just any journal. This was a treasure trove of raw, unfiltered thoughts from Ali himself, penned during his prime years, that defined boxing, that defined an era. And within these pages, secrets, insights, and revelations that would change the sport of boxing as we know it. Imagine the power of those words. The same hands that floored opponents in the ring were now leaving behind a record of thoughts, strategies, and personal revelations that the world had never seen. It's easy to picture the world champion, bold and brash, sitting in a quiet moment of solitude, writing down his deepest reflections. But what was he thinking when he wrote those words? What were the true motivations behind his legendary fights? And more importantly, what did he reveal in these intimate writings that could alter the way we view boxing today? This journal isn't just a collection of random thoughts or training logs. It's a window into the psyche of a man who revolutionized not only boxing, but the very culture of sport itself. As the world knows, Ali was not just a fighter. He was an icon who transcended the ropes. His words carried weight, whether he was taunting his opponents, speaking out for racial justice, or inspiring millions with his unmatched confidence and charisma. But what if the words inside this journal told a different story? What if, in these pages, were the untold strategies, motivations, and personal struggles that shaped the man who would become a legend? What if, inside this lost journal, Ali had revealed something so profound that it could change the entire legacy of boxing? As the journal was opened, those questions began to unravel. But what was found inside wasn't just a few simple anecdotes or motivational quotes. It was a game-changer. One by one, the journal entries gave insight into Ali's thoughts on his biggest fights, his true feelings on his rivals, and even the mental and emotional toll the sport took on him. He spoke candidly about his struggles with the pressures of fame, the internal battles that raged within him, and the personal demons he fought outside of the ring. His words painted a picture of a man not just determined to be the greatest boxer of all time, but a man deeply aware of the consequences of that pursuit, of the cost of glory. But there was something even more astonishing in these pages. Ali didn't just write about his own life, he wrote about the future of boxing. He spoke of a vision for the sport that, at the time, would have seemed impossible. A future where the sport would evolve, where the fighters of tomorrow would push beyond the limits he had set. He spoke of techniques and training methods that would revolutionize the way boxers approached the ring. Some of his ideas seemed far-fetched, even in his time, but in the context of today's boxing world, they were nothing short of prophetic. Perhaps most chilling of all, however, was a series of entries that seemed to predict not just his own rise to the top, but the changes that boxing as a whole would undergo in the coming decades. These were no ordinary musings. They were a roadmap, a blueprint for the future. The training methods he described were nothing like anything seen before, a fusion of physical prowess, psychological strategy, and mental endurance that only a champion like Ali could have envisioned. The techniques were revolutionary, yet they made perfect sense once you understood the man behind them. It was almost as if Ali had known the sport would need to adapt, that boxing could no longer be defined by brute force alone. And that's where things get really interesting. The revelations in Ali's journal weren't just theories or idle musings, they were practical, actionable concepts that would change the training, the fighting style, and the very philosophy of boxing. Imagine a world where Ali's ideas were put into practice. What would boxing look like? Would we see fighters pushing new limits, adopting a completely different approach to the sport? Could we finally see the next generation of fighters who are even more skilled, more mentally prepared, and more strategically savvy than anything we've seen before? As we continue to sift through the pages of Ali's journal, the implications of his thoughts become increasingly clear. This was no mere athlete's diary. It was a vision of the future, a peek behind the curtain of a genius mind that not only mastered the art of boxing, but envisioned how it could be forever transformed. And yet, there's one final entry, one last revelation, that has everyone on edge. Could it be the key to understanding Ali's ultimate legacy? Could it hold the missing piece that unlocks the true potential of boxing? The answer? Well, that's still out there. And as we turn the final pages, one question looms larger than the rest. What was Ali holding back? What did he write in those final words that he didn't want the world to know until now? The journal, now in the hands of the researchers and historians, quickly became a focal point of intrigue in the world of sports and beyond. While many saw the discovery of Muhammad Ali's lost journal as a remarkable relic of boxing history, there were others, boxing purists, trainers, and even fighters, who viewed it with a healthy dose of skepticism. Was this truly Ali's work? Could these entries be the ramblings of a fan, a hoax, or perhaps a carefully constructed narrative designed to shape his legacy even further? The sheer gravity of the contents made it impossible to ignore, but with every turn of the page, there was always that lingering doubt. The journal revealed a man in conflict with himself, a legend struggling to balance his insatiable desire for greatness with the burden of being the most famous athlete in the world. Ali was not just a boxer, he was an idea, a force of nature, an embodiment of courage and defiance. Yet within the pages of his journal, there was a vulnerability that few had ever seen. He wrote with brutal honesty about the toll his career had taken on his body, his mind, and his soul. One entry spoke of the isolation he felt, despite being surrounded by thousands of admirers and a media circus that followed his every move. He reflected on his rivalries, not just with fighters like Joe Frazier and George Foreman, but with the world itself. Every punch thrown, every victory claimed, came with an invisible cost that only he seemed to truly understand. The most unsettling part of the journal, however, wasn't the raw emotions Ali expressed, nor the intense self-awareness he displayed. It was the sense that Ali had been planning something bigger, something that went beyond the ring. The final pages of the journal hinted at a project, a vision that could change the way boxing, and perhaps sport in general, was perceived. But what was it? Was it a new fighting philosophy? A revolutionary approach to training? Or, as some speculated, was it a calculated move to cement his place not just as the greatest boxer, but as the greatest mind in the sport's history? Meanwhile, a group of former trainers and colleagues of Ali, now in their twilight years, found themselves revisiting their pasts. They were the ones who had worked with him, seen his dedication up close, and been part of his journey from a brash young contender to a seasoned champion. Many of them had no idea about the journal's existence, and now that it was being revealed to the world, they each had their own theories about its significance. Some believed it was a window into Ali's soul, a glimpse of a man who had seen more than anyone should ever have to endure. Others, however, saw the journal as a challenge, one that called into question the very essence of boxing itself. One former trainer, who had worked with Ali during some of his most defining moments, couldn't help but wonder if the journal held secrets that were never meant to be shared. He recalled a conversation with Ali after one of their major victories, where the champion had spoken cryptically about a future where boxing would no longer be about brute strength, but about the mind. "The brain can be a better weapon than the fists," Ali had said, almost as if he were reading the future. The trainer had dismissed the statement at the time, thinking it to be the musings of a man who was constantly reinventing himself. Now, as he read the journal's contents, That statement took on a whole new meaning. Could Ali have known that the future of boxing required a mental revolution? Ali's closest rival, a fighter who had spent years locked in an intense battle with the champion, both inside and outside the ring, also found himself caught in the whirlwind of this discovery. Unlike many of Ali's admirers, he was less willing to accept the journal's authenticity without question. In his mind, the journal was a reflection of the same mind games that Ali had played with the public for years. But the more he read, the more it seemed as though there was an honesty within these pages that could not be fabricated. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that Ali had buried something important in those final pages, something that, if revealed, would completely reshape their bitter rivalry. As the journal continued to circulate through boxing circles, whispers began to spread about a particular entry. This wasn't like the others, which detailed training regimens and philosophical musings. No, this entry seemed like a prophecy, a warning. Ali wrote about an event that had never come to pass in his lifetime, but that seemed strangely prophetic in hindsight. He described a new breed of fighter, someone who would be faster, smarter, and more unpredictable than anything the boxing world had ever seen. The entry spoke of a revolution, one where the mental game would surpass physical prowess. The words were cryptic, but to those in the know, they spoke of something much larger than a mere prediction. They suggested that Ali himself had seen the future of the sport. But who was this fighter? The journal gave no names, only vague descriptions that seemed to match the characteristics of certain modern fighters. Was Ali predicting the rise of a new generation of boxers who would embody his vision? Or was he hinting at something even more unexpected, perhaps a fighter who would challenge everything Ali had built? As the mystery deepened, so too did the number of questions surrounding the journal. Some began to speculate that Ali had known of a fighter's potential before the world did. Others wondered if the legend himself had been part of a greater plan to elevate boxing into something more than just a sport, a philosophical journey that would one day captivate the world. There was also another unsettling aspect of the journal that had surfaced: Ali's doubts. Though he had been celebrated for his unshakable confidence, the journal revealed that there were moments, especially towards the end of his career, where he questioned everything. His thoughts on retirement, legacy, and what boxing had truly given him were far from the bravado that he displayed to the public. One entry, dated just months before his final fight, painted a picture of a man who was torn between his passion for the sport and the toll it had taken on his health and his relationships. The legacy he had fought so hard to build suddenly seemed uncertain to him, and he wondered aloud if the sport had loved him as much as he had loved it. It was this vulnerability, this raw honesty, that added another layer of complexity to the mystery. What had Ali known that the rest of the world didn't? What had he been preparing for, even as he fought his final battles in the ring? And more intriguingly, what was the final revelation that he alluded to in those last carefully written pages? Had the greatest boxer of all time left behind a message for the world? Or was there something hidden in these final words that could change everything? As experts continue to pore over the journal, deciphering Ali's cryptic passages and contemplating the implications of his revelations, one thing becomes clear: Muhammad Ali's legacy is far from over. The discovery of his lost journal has opened a new chapter, one that may lead us into uncharted territory, a world where the true nature of boxing and the man who redefined it may not be what we've always thought. The world waits with bated breath for the answers. But one thing remains certain: what we thought we knew about Ali may only be the beginning of a much larger, much deeper story. As the mystery surrounding Muhammad Ali's lost journal continued to unfold, an unexpected twist sent shockwaves through the boxing community. What had initially been seen as a groundbreaking discovery, a simple collection of thoughts, strategies, and predictions, now seemed to hold far deeper implications. A startling revelation came to light when one of Ali's former managers, a figure long associated with his rise to prominence, surfaced with startling claims of his own. According to him, Ali had been in contact with an enigmatic figure during the latter stages of his career, someone who had offered him guidance, not just in the ring, but in shaping his legacy outside of it. The name of this figure was never mentioned in the journal, but the manager's cryptic statements seemed to connect the dots between Ali's final thoughts and the mysterious fighter he had written about. The manager's testimony was a game-changer. Ali, a man known for his independence and confidence, had relied on someone else's guidance in his final years. It was a shocking concept to many, particularly those who had idolized Ali for his bold self-assurance. The boxing world had always seen him as the lone wolf, the fighter who did it all on his own. The revelation raised new questions. Who was this mysterious figure? What influence did they have on Ali? And most intriguingly, what role had they played in shaping the ideas that would ultimately transform boxing? As the story unfolded, whispers began circulating about the true identity of this figure, an individual who seemed to have a deeper understanding of the sport, its psychological underpinnings, and its future potential. Some believed it was an unassuming coach, perhaps one who had worked with Ali behind the scenes. Others speculated that it could have been someone outside of boxing altogether, a philosopher or psychologist who had helped Ali unlock the mental game that would come to define his later years. But there was no concrete evidence, no definitive answer, only the growing tension that this mystery was far from solved. As if the stakes weren't high enough, another unexpected development emerged. A second journal, one that had never been seen before, surfaced. This one, however, wasn't just a continuation of Ali's musings, it was radically different. The handwriting was eerily similar, but the content was far darker and more cryptic. In this journal, Ali's reflections took on a far more ominous tone. It became clear that, as his career progressed, the pressure on him had intensified, not just from external forces, but from internal ones as well. The once immovable confidence that had defined his public persona began to crack. This new journal chronicled his struggles with mental and physical exhaustion, his growing doubts, and his fear that he might be on the verge of losing his grip on what had made him great. The entries in this second journal felt like a direct confrontation with the public's perception of Ali. No longer did he write about the grandiose victories or boastful proclamations. Instead, he wrestled with his own mortality, his legacy, and the psychological toll of his fame. This journal hinted at a man who had begun to see himself as a reluctant hero, someone who was questioning his place in the world as both a boxer and a symbol. Ali's words reflected a man searching for redemption, not in the ring, but in the way he would be remembered. The pages became more fragmented, filled with cryptic phrases and unfinished thoughts. The same man who once declared, "I am the greatest," now seemed to be unraveling the very fabric of his own identity. The deeper the investigation went, the more it seemed as though there were layers to Ali's story that had never been fully understood. Could these journals be telling two entirely different sides of the same man? Was the world only privy to a carefully constructed version of Muhammad Ali, a persona crafted for the public eye, while the real man struggled with inner demons that would never be fully exposed? And what did this new journal mean for the future of boxing? Had Ali truly foreseen a time when fighters would need more than just physical strength to succeed? Was this second journal a direct response to the revolution he had foreseen in the first one? The stakes had grown higher than anyone could have anticipated. What had started as a story about a lost journal had turned into a multi-layered mystery, one that threatened to reshape everything the boxing world knew about its greatest champion. Now, as the public waited for answers, the pressure was mounting on those closest to Ali: trainers, managers, and former opponents. They were being drawn into the story, not as passive observers, but as active participants in unraveling the mystery. Could they shed light on the identity of Ali's mysterious guide? Could they piece together the fragmented journals and uncover the hidden message Ali had left behind? Just as the world thought it was starting to get answers, an unexpected and shocking turn of events occurred. The second journal, with its dark revelations, disappeared. Vanished. No one knew how or why, but it was gone. The discovery of the second journal had already sent waves through the boxing community, and now its sudden disappearance added another layer of intrigue. Had someone taken it to prevent the truth from coming out? Or was there something in those pages that was so explosive that even the champions of the sport couldn't bear to see it revealed? As the search for the missing journal intensified, so too did the mounting sense of urgency. The first journal, now analyzed by countless experts, was starting to give up its secret strategies, predictions, and mental techniques that were ahead of their time. But what had been lost in the second journal? Was there a connection between the missing pages and the identity of the fighter Ali had written about in his final entries? Was this the key to unlocking the true legacy of Muhammad Ali? Or was there something even more sinister at play? With the disappearance of the second journal, the mystery was far from over. Ali's life, his career, and his legacy were now more enigmatic than ever. What was in those pages that had disappeared without a trace? Who was this mysterious figure that had influenced Ali's final years? And how would these unanswered questions change the way the world viewed boxing and Muhammad Ali forever? The boxing world waited, suspended in uncertainty, as the search continued. The answers were out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. But what would those answers mean for the future of the sport? Would the truth about Ali's final revelations bring about the revolution he had dreamed of, or would it expose a darker, more complex side of the legend than anyone was prepared for? As the search for the missing second journal reached a fever pitch, the world's obsession with Muhammad Ali's lost words began to peak. Boxing enthusiasts, historians, and conspiracy theorists alike scoured every corner of Ali's past, hoping to unearth any clue that might explain the journal's sudden disappearance. The stakes had never been higher, and the mystery surrounding Ali's final revelations was now a global sensation. Then, out of nowhere, an unexpected twist occurred, one that no one saw coming. A young boxing journalist who had spent years uncovering forgotten stories in the sport came forward with a shocking claim. He revealed that while tracking down sources related to Ali's legacy, he had stumbled upon an old recording of a private interview with the boxer himself, an interview that had never been aired, and one that contained a confession Ali had made just months before his final retirement. This interview, the journalist claimed, had been lost in the vaults of a small local radio station, only to be rediscovered during a routine audit of their archives. When the recording surfaced, it quickly made its way into the hands of the public, and what it revealed was more than anyone could have imagined. In the interview, Ali spoke with an eerie calmness about the fighter he had predicted in his journals, the one who would revolutionize the sport. He described the fighter not just as a physical prodigy, but as a mental force, someone who could manipulate the mind of an opponent in ways no one had ever conceived. Ali explained that he had seen glimpses of this future in his own career, the way the greatest fighters didn't just focus on physical endurance or technique, but on psychological warfare. His words were prophetic, but they didn't stop there. In the final moments of the recording, Ali did the unthinkable. He named the fighter he had been talking about for years. It wasn't just a prediction, it was a revelation. The fighter Ali described was none other than the young, then unknown talent who would later rise to dominate the sport in the decades that followed, Floyd Mayweather Jr. The boxing world was left in shock. The connection between Ali's lost journals and Mayweather's eventual rise seemed so improbable that it was almost too surreal to believe. But when the details of the interview were pieced together with the content of the journals, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Ali had known. Not only had he predicted the revolution in boxing, but he had also recognized, long before anyone else, the exceptional talent that would define the future of the sport. In the journals, Ali had written cryptically about the next generation of fighters, but it was this final interview that confirmed what had once been speculation. Ali had seen the future, and he had prepared for it in his own way. But there was a final twist that no one expected. As it turned out, the second journal, the one that had disappeared, had never truly been lost at all. In a final dramatic turn of events, the journal was found, but not in the way anyone had imagined. It wasn't hidden by some secretive figure or lost in the chaos of the world. Instead, it had been left in plain sight on Ali's own terms. It had been given to a trusted confidant, a person whose name had never been publicly associated with Ali, but had been involved in his personal and professional life for years. This confidant had kept the journal safe, ensuring its contents were preserved for the day when the world would be ready to hear Ali's final words. The revelation of the second journal sent shockwaves through the world of boxing and beyond. It confirmed everything that had been hinted at in the first journal and the lost interview. Muhammad Ali had seen himself as a catalyst for change, not just in the ring, but in the way the world viewed the sport itself. The final journal entries painted a picture of a man at peace with his legacy, accepting that he had played his part in the evolution of boxing, but that the future belonged to others. Ali had passed the torch, and in doing so, he had set the stage for the mental revolution in boxing that would come to define the next generation of fighters. With the journals fully revealed and the true scope of Ali's vision finally understood, the world could now see the complete picture of the man who had transcended the sport. Ali wasn't just the greatest boxer of all time, he was a philosopher, a visionary, and a pioneer who had laid the groundwork for the future of boxing. His ability to read the sport's trajectory, to understand its mental and psychological elements, and to foresee the rise of fighters like Mayweather had cemented his legacy as one of the greatest minds in sports history. The discovery of Ali's lost journals and the final shocking twist left the boxing world forever changed. The conversations around boxing, once dominated by physical prowess and brute strength, shifted toward mental conditioning, strategy, and psychological warfare. Fighters, coaches, and fans began to re-evaluate the very essence of the sport. Boxing was no longer just about throwing punches, it was about mastering the mind, understanding the psychology of an opponent, and being prepared for the mental and emotional challenges that came with each fight. For those who had followed Ali's career from the beginning, the discovery of his journals was the ultimate gift, a glimpse into the mind of a man who had always been more than a champion in the ring. It was a final testament to his genius and his understanding of what it meant to truly be the greatest. And for the generations to come, Muhammad Ali's legacy would continue to inspire, not just in the realm of boxing, but in the way we think about greatness itself. As the boxing world turned the final pages of Ali's journals, one thing became undeniably clear. The greatest had left behind more than just records and trophies. He had left behind a blueprint for the future, a future where mental fortitude, vision, and strategy would shape the sport in ways no one could have predicted. And in doing so, Ali had given the world the ultimate gift, the realization that greatness isn't just about what you achieve, but about the impact you leave behind. The world was left to ponder what other surprises, secrets, and lessons did Ali leave behind, waiting to be uncovered. The legacy of Muhammad Ali had only just begun to reveal its full depth.